with a knife video, and today we are finally going to consider the results of the poll that I took, sort of an informal poll. First of all, huge thank you to all of you for participating. I got a lot of feedback, tons and tons of comments on my video where I specifically asked you guys and sort of gave the stipulations of this discussion. And you guys did a great job of weighing in and really thinking carefully. And a number of you really thought long and hard about this and took it seriously, and so thank you for doing that, and thank you for all the contributions, and you guys gave me a lot of things to think about. And so if you want to see just the list, okay, so just a raw sheet of data, I will put that list over on the Sharp Stuff Facebook page. And guess what, you guys made tons of recommendations for great knives, and so I think that list will be highly valuable, not only for for us to share among ourselves, but if you're new to this and you kind of want to get an idea of where to start with your collection or what knives to consider if you're looking for that one great knife, over on the Sharpstock Facebook page, there will be a list contributed by a number of you who watch the channel regularly. And by the way, most of the feedback I did get some feedback from a couple of other sources like the Canadian Knife and Gear page and some Instagram feedback. But even the Instagram feedback, I could tell you guys gave me enough context to realize that most of you are viewers of the channel. So this is definitely biased by the fact that most of you guys that contributed are going to be regular viewers. And that I think is pretty cool. So again, thanks for doing that. And yeah, if you're new to the knife hobby, go and take a look at that list, and I think it'll be a huge benefit to you. So the first thing that I want to say is, guess what? As you would expect, the top 5 or 7 or something like that rounded out the list were about what you would expect. So we had things like the Delica, the Native, the Endura. Those were near the bottom of the list. The very top pick was Para 2, Para 3. And a lot of you, I was really surprised by this, a lot of you actually put Para 2/Para 3. Okay, and I kind of get that. You guys know I'm not a huge Para 3 fan. I just feel like the Para 2 is so perfect that making a smaller version doesn't make it any better. My bias is for larger stuff, so making a larger version, yeah, that would be a little more appealing to me. And a couple of you actually said, what about a Paramilitary 4 where, it's like a 4-inch blade, similar in every other way, which would almost be just a military, but, maybe a Spyderco military with a compression lock and a proper placement of the clip would maybe be what you had in mind there. So yeah, Para 1 and 2, so Para 2, Para 3 came in at the top by quite a large margin. A number of ties, so that's why the rest of the list, the Manix 2, the Reptilian, the Benchmade Freak, the Rat Model 1, Rat Model 2, as I already mentioned, the Delica, the Native, the Endura, all of those knives came in pretty high. Cold Steel Recon 1 Mini got a couple of mentions. The American Lawman got a couple of mentions, but wouldn't have been in the top 5 for sure. Maybe would have been in the top 10. So pretty expected list, okay? All the standard stuff that we kind of think of seeing. Now, what I want to do with this video is actually share with you the things that surprised me, knives that I thought would be on the list that weren't, knives that I didn't think would be on the list that were. Okay, I want to bring those up and just kind of share with you and maybe offer some explanation for how that happened. So the first thing I've got to say, guys, that really surprised me, and I guess I should have had my Contigo here. Actually, maybe I do. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna reach off camera for a bit. Okay, yeah. Okay. So the Benchmade Contigo was not on the list, and that's expected. This is not a great, everyman EDC knife. But guess what was not on the list? The knife that shares this blade shape. Well, I guess there's 2 knives that share the blade shape, but the main one that I really expected to see was the Benchmade 940, and no one said Benchmade 940. I was really surprised at that, and maybe that's because I don't give the 940 enough attention on this channel, and if you guys are mostly viewers, or maybe some of you, if you share my preferences, maybe you're not in love with the 940 as much, but I would love to put it out there to you guys. What is it about the 940 that that made it not stand out in your mind? Did you just forget? Is there something about that knife that you dislike? Did you all watch Wrangler Star's video and be like, yep, the 940 is out, the Para 3 is in? I know that's I'm being a little facetious there. I know all of you guys know better than to take Wrangler Star too seriously when it comes to knife stuff. But for whatever reason, the 940 didn't make the list. And maybe it's just, that people like a slicier blade, and the 940 is not the sliciest blade. I like the 940 because of its balance. It's a small, slim, easy to carry knife, but it has a very tough, durable blade that still cuts pretty nicely. So, it does strike a pretty good balance. And I actually think it would be a pretty good everyman's EDC, but it's pretty expensive. The blade grind is not going to be for everybody, and it can be a little small in the handle. So perhaps those are the reasons. But I'd love to hear, let me know down below why you think the 940 didn't make this list, or why you in particular didn't pick it. All right, let's move this guy out of the way and bring in the next sort of surprising piece of feedback that came in. Hold on, it's all dirty. I didn't realize. There, that gets some of the gunk off. If you ever wondered if I use stuff, the gunk on this blade will indicate, I think it's a little bit of glue from tape or something, so it's not going to come off just that easily. Anyway, it's fine. A number of you, though, mentioned the Chris Reeve knives, either the Nkosi or the 21, and a couple mentioned the small 21. So I kind of put all those results together, and that was the main point that I have here is, one, I didn't expect a knife this expensive to even get close to the list. All right, I just figured most people would go $400. That's not an everyman's knife. Forget it. But a number of you suggested the 21 or the Nkosi or the small 21. I even got a couple of mentions for the 31, even though it's not out yet. Someone said, look, I haven't handled it yet, but being the descendant of the 21, I think it's going to be pretty good. And a couple mentioned the Umnumzon. So why Chris Reeve on the list? I think there are a number of reasons. One, okay, this was a list compiled by knife enthusiasts. All right, and so, we like we like Chris Reeve knives, and I think most of us recognize that there is a simplicity about this knife and a plainness to it that make it very broadly appealing. This is sort of a quintessential knife. All right, anyone who you give this to is pretty much going to know how to use it. It's going to be fairly user friendly, and it really is, a knife directed at people who are not necessarily huge enthusiasts, but just want a really good functional tool. And that's what makes this knife so great. The design as well, just all the features that go into a Chris Reeve knife. And we've talked about this before, so I don't want to belabor this point. But, definitely when you think of, and I suppose probably my description where I said, think of the knife that you would kind of give everyone. Well, I know Chris Reeve knives are a very popular gift because people understand that, number one, most people won't buy this for themselves, and two, they will appreciate the craftsmanship and the quality and the longevity of it. So that's my assertion. But what was interesting is not the other high-end knives that you would associate with this, that maybe you'd compare it to, didn't even get a mention. Right? There wasn't much said about any other knife that was in the multi-$100 price bracket. I got one sort of secondary suggestion for the XM18 Gen 6 and for the Koenig Arius, but they weren't even those people's first pick. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. The only knife that really got picked a whole lot as a first pick and a recommendation for anyone to carry was the Nkosi 21 or small 21. And I put those all together because they're very, very close. Okay, they're very, very similar knives. The next big surprise, and again, maybe it's just because of my viewers, okay, but a lot of people mentioned the ReconOne. A lot of people mentioned it as, that one knife that they think everyone ought to use and carry. And again, guys, I think I get it. So let me see if I can get into the mind of the part of the community that responded to this. I think people, and I'm definitely one of these people, I think what we appreciate about the ReconOne is for, one, it's not crazy expensive, like $100. Two, it's extremely well balanced. This knife is tough as nails, and yet it will still slice like a dream. Okay, so this is really the one knife that can do everything. It can slaughter an animal. It can peel a piece of fruit. It can, cut up cardboard. It can do outdoor work. It can do indoor work. I mean, and then in addition to all of those utility tasks, it can also serve a defensive role. And so it really is a one knife solution. And that's pretty hard to come up with, especially for the price point. There are certainly competitors to this, but not too many that cost the same. Plus you've got the triad lock, so it's super strong. And you think, at least for me, I think of sort of non-knife people and I go, better give them a strong lock because they may not be well versed in knife safety. So, and perhaps that's what was kind of going through a lot of your heads. Now, I did get a number of mentions given to the ReconOne Mini, which is, a similar knife, just in a slightly smaller package. And in fact, here's the thing that surprised me. After my recommendation of the American Lawman, you guys picked by a pretty good margin the ReconOne over the American Lawman. So I thought that was pretty interesting. All right, so the American Lawman did get a little bit of attention. And by the way, thank you for whoever weighed in. I got a couple of people who weighed in and said, hey, the flat ground American Lawman still has good edge geometry, still performs very well. So, don't pass on it just because it doesn't have a hollow grind anymore. It's still very well done. So I was happy to hear that. Thank you for weighing in with that. At some point I may get my hands on a flat ground American Lawman and do a full comparison between it and the hollow grind. There are some other knives first that I think ought to be, that I think I need to give some attention to, but that's definitely something that I'm considering. Actually, one of the things on my knife to-do list is to pick up another Ultimate Hunter so that I can kind of do a full Andrew Demko cold steel discussion and comparison, because now I've got the Formax, the 8010, and then the Ultimate Hunter, and those are the knives from Cold Steel based on Demko Customs. So that's a bit of an aside, but I was pretty surprised that the American Lawman the ReconOne got as much love as it did, and maybe I shouldn't be given the typical content of my channel. Now, one knife that was a bit of a surprise to me, but shouldn't have been, was and I didn't bring one with me. My bad, guys. So I'm not going to throw one on screen, but I'll put a picture in so you guys are all familiar with it. You guys already know all about this knife, but the SAK, so Swiss Army Knives, got a really good argument. Okay, so here was the argument for the Swiss Army knife, and I really, really appreciate it. Barry, that might have been you. I think that's right. Barry Cole, I think, made a very articulate argument in favor of the Swiss Army knife. And I don't know what particular model he had in mind, but probably one of the moderate ones. Okay, not the Forester and not the Champ, which are the two that I have, something a little more conservative. So one, because they're widely accepted all around the world, wherever you go, almost no one is going to bat an eye at a Swiss Army knife. Everyone just associates that with a folding pocket knife, and if you pull one out in almost any circumstance, people are going to be like, yeah, no big deal. It's just a pocket knife. Two, they're legal almost everywhere because they're not locking and because they're smaller size, many of their models. You're not going to get in any legal trouble for having one, using one, whatever the case may be. The other thing is they're widely available, right? Almost anywhere you go. And I can tell you, walk into any hardware store, Walmart, Canadian Tire, or even some mom and pop shop downtown in a small town, and if they have a pocket knife, it's probably a Swiss Army knife. So, and I think that's another good argument in its favor. And of course, the other thing we ought to bring up is the fact that there's tons of YouTubers right now getting sort of a special edition. I think it's the Tinker that they're all doing, but a special edition Swiss Army knife that sort of has their logo on it and stuff like that. And I think Blade HQ is doing that. So the Swiss Army knife, I definitely think that's worthwhile here to mention, and it was a little bit of a surprise to me. Now, some knives were suggested that made me kind of go, oh yeah, I should have mentioned that in my initial video. So those knives, there are a couple that really stood out especially, and then, one last one that I want to mention. So the two that stood out the most were, number one, the Cold Steel Broken Skull. The Broken Skull, despite the name, is a fantastically practical knife. It's slim, it's lightweight, it's tough, it's great steel, it's amazingly easy to carry, it's pretty comfortable in hand, and it has a blade that is just slim and slicey and fantastic. And so that would be a good contender, the Broken Skull, for a knife that just about anyone, and the shape of it with the clip point and the shape of it again is something that, let's throw just something else in here so while I'm talking you get something to look at. The shape of it for sure, just kind of looks like a standard knife, and for that reason I think it's going to get away with a lot of places that you could get away with carrying it where you might not get away with carrying something else, even in Endura, just because the blade and the look of the blade is a little bit different than what people are used to. The other knife that I think is a really good contender on the list that I didn't even mention was the Spidey Chef in LC200N. This is a knife that I feel remiss in not having had on the channel, and I will have to get one and talk about it, because there's a really, really cool feature of the Spidey Chef, which is it's almost 100% rust proof. And to me, that is cool, right? I think that's worth mentioning. And if you live in a part of the world that has high humidity, or if you're regularly doing activities that get your knife wet, that LC200N is going to be fantastic. And of course, the LC200N combined with the titanium and the screws and everything else, that's a great, great option. And it's not too big. It's a slicey blade. There's a lot to say about the Spidey Chef to recommend it. And so I definitely see why that was on the list. And as soon as I saw the first person mention it, I was like, oh yeah, you know what? That should have been I should have at least mentioned it in my introduction video. Lastly, the only ZT that I really feel could conceivably belong on this list is the Zero Tolerance 0630. Maybe that or the 0460. Hopefully I'm getting that right. Both of those are on washers. Both are just really, really simple, usable knives. And those are the primary things that I was looking for. Now, the price point on those is going to be a little high, and perhaps arguably, ZT doesn't belong on the list for that reason. But remember, this was on the list. So, I think we can be a little bit open-minded about that. Finally, there were a few knives mentioned that I actually thought of before, but because they're too new, I didn't put them in my initial discussion video, but they probably could. In 5 years, if these knives are still around and they're still loved and still going strong, then they should absolutely be put onto this list. The first one was the TRM Atom. The second one was the Mastrop Ferrum Forge Mordax. And the last one was the Steel Will Tasso. All of those knives are new for this year and very well balanced knives, like good steel, good price, good in hand, just all around great knives, and definitely have, that balance point that could make them a widely appreciated knife, where just everyone who's into knives, and even lots of people who aren't into knives, could really appreciate them. So I think those knives deserve to be on the list. And here's what I suspect, guys. I know the TRM stuff right now can be a little hard to get your hands on, but generally speaking, companies want to make money. So if they have something that's really popular, they're going to find a way to gear up production and sell it. Okay, people don't want to be leaving sales, missing sales because of lack of availability, right? That's a huge business no-no. So I suspect you'll see better availability from TRM in the not too distant future. The Ferrum Forge Mordax, I should put a link. I'll see if I can find one. If I can, I'll put it down below. But the Mordax, I think, has recently gone down in price to like $180 when they were $240 initially, I believe. And that $180 is probably where it should have been from the start. I was fortunate to get one. As you guys know, I've shared this before, but when I share Mastrop links and you use them, it works this way for everybody, just that I have a bit of an audience. So when I share the links to drop now, not mass drop, and you guys use those links and actually buy something, I get a small kickback, a referral credit, I think is what they call it. So anyway, it only happens for new people who sign up, but because of that referral credit, I was able to get that Mordax for a pretty reasonable price. I still had to pay something, but like I think I'd probably accrued half the price or something in credits. But nowadays at 180 bucks, that's a huge win. And of course, the steel wheel tasso, I've checked out the small. The large is on my list. I will get one and review it for you before the end of the year. But that's a really, really impressive knife, and absolutely, I think, a contender for the single best all-around pocket knife. It's certainly on my list for the top 10 knives of this year, and just a huge win from steel wheel. So, conclusion, would I change my recommendations from the first video? No, I don't think I would, but I would probably add to it. At the very least, I would add the Spidey Chef, perhaps the Broken Skull, and probably make mention of some of the new stuff that I just talked about that is pretty close. And I'd probably mention a Swiss Army knife as well, even though for me, it's not a huge recommendation. I mean, it's definitely a good knife. I don't have anything against them, but I tend to like the more modern locking, tougher, tactical-ish stuff. All right, finally, excuse me. As many of you insisted on mentioning, even though we all know this to be the case, and I said this from the beginning, there really is no one perfect knife for everyone because everyone has slightly different needs and preferences. And, it's hard to make a solid recommendation. However, I think you guys did a great job of recognizing that when it comes to folding knives, there are some objective realities that need to be considered and dealt with, and some objective things that do make a knife either broadly applicable or perhaps not as widely applicable. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention, I thought it was interesting that there were very few, if almost no, I think one time a Riot was mentioned, but there were virtually no mentions of the high-end overseas stuff. There was nothing from Riot, nothing from WE, nothing even from, Mass Drop where it's a collaboration, and none of the other, production collaborations with any of the overseas producers. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. All right, there you go, guys. That's my overall take on the feedback that you got. Check out the Sharp Stuff Facebook page if you want to just see the pure list ranked from top to bottom. And it'll be a long list because I'll include even the stuff that only one or two people mentioned. It'll be obviously down near the bottom. But, I feel like most of the knives mentioned were absolutely legitimate, and you guys really did think about it. So I'm gonna include them on the list. Okay, thanks for participating. It was a lot of fun, really fun video to make, and even this video has been a lot of fun to kind of think through the results and share my impressions. And I'd love to hear you guys down below, especially on any of the points that I've raised or any others that this video brings to mind. All right, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to use I'll put a link to DLT Trading in the description box. Using that link does help the channel an awful lot. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.